Before she served them, Madame Oyoh Yoh pulled off her red underpants, dipped them deep into the bubbling pot of jollof, and stirred. The cloth soaked in oil, pepper, and something unseen, something that changed their souls. From the first bite, the men lost their senses. They forgot their wives, forgot their children, and remembered only her. But that was only the beginning. Each week, a few unlucky ones followed her into a locked red room, and there she cut off their testicles. She pounded them in her mortar, blood mixing with spice, preparing her next meal.
Forget your home. Follow me. You're not.
The buka was no bigger than a goat shed, yet its smoke rose higher than the factory itself. Men rushed there straight from work, dust still on their bodies, sweat dripping from their backs. They fought for seats, elbowing each other, eager for a plate of the rice that made their heads spin and their hearts race. They did not see when she dipped her pants into the pot, stirring slowly, humming a song of hunger. The cloth left behind a scent no herb could carry, a spell no charm could break. From the first taste, the men forgot their homes. They licked their plates clean, eyes glazed, smiles foolish. Wives came searching, but when they called, the men did not answer. Their ears were filled only with her voice, her laughter, her promises. At first, people thought it was only greed. Factory workers were poor, and free time was their luxury. But the truth grew darker with each passing day. Men began to spend all they earned at the buka, their coins scattered on her floor, their labor sold for rice on stew. They walked home drunk on spice, refusing to eat their wives' food, mocking the women who wept at their doors. Some never came home at all. They were the chosen ones, the ones she smiled at for too long, the ones she told to stay after closing. Those who entered her red room never returned. The wives searched, the children cried, but the pounding began. Thump, thump, thump. Madame Oyoh Yoh's mortar struck the night, crushing testicles into pulp, seasoning her next dish of power. Every evening, before she opened her doors, Madame Oyoh Yoh performed her secret ritual. She took off her red underpants, damp with sweat, and dipped them into the steaming pot of jollof. She stirred slowly, her eyes half closed, humming an old song that belonged to no church, no shrine, only to hunger. The cloth spread a strange scent that rose with the pepper smoke and wrapped itself around the men waiting outside. They sniffed the air like dogs, eyes wide, stomachs empty even when they had eaten. The first spoonful made them sweat, the second spoonful made them smile, and by the third, their minds were gone. Their mouths begged for more, and their bodies obeyed, even when their pockets emptied. The women of Afari knew something was wrong. They had cooked jollof all their lives, but never had rice turned their husbands into slaves. The men no longer cared for their wives' touch or their children's laughter. They worked harder than ever in the factory, but not for their families, for the buka. Even when they were sick, they dragged themselves there, coughing and limping, because the spell of the pants was stronger than medicine. The women whispered in corners, asking, "What is she feeding them?" But the men only laughed in their faces and licked their greasy fingers. The buka had stolen their husbands, and the pounding at night told the women that soon she would steal their lives too. Behind the smoky kitchen was the red room, locked and forbidden. The walls were painted a deep crimson, the floor stained darker still. It was here that Madame Oyoh Yoh carried her chosen men, the ones she wanted most. At first, she chose the young factory workers, the ones too poor to be missed by the world. She lowered them with her smile, with a gentle hand on the shoulder, with the promise of more food in the back. They followed like sheep to the slaughter. Once inside, the door shut and silence swallowed them. Then came the sound, metal scraping, cloth tearing, the sharp cry of a man cut short. When she reappeared, she carried a wooden mortar and pestle, her arms wet to the elbow. The pounding began. Thump, thump, thump. Not yam, not pepper, not meat, but testicles freshly cut, their life crushed into pulp. She sang as she worked, a low humming that chilled the air. Each strike broke bone, each grind released power. The paste was not thrown away. She mixed it into her next pot of rice, stirring it with the same red underpants, making the food richer, heavier with spirit. When the men ate, they swallowed not only rice, but the essence of their brothers. The women outside wept, the children waited, but the men kept coming, kept chewing, their faces glowing with unnatural joy. No one spoke of the missing ones, for hunger had made them blind, and the buka fire burned too bright.
Soon, the factory men no longer looked like themselves. Their cheeks sank, their eyes hollowed, but their smiles grew wider. They staggered through afari like puppets, their hands trembling, their voices weak. Wives called them by name, but they did not answer. Children pulled their hands, but they shook them off. They went only where the buka called, and when they were not eating, they stared into the distance as if waiting for something unseen. Their bodies smelled of spice and smoke. Their mouths muttered her name in sleep. The women prayed, but the gods seemed silent. How could the men be saved when they did not want saving? Yet Madame Oyoh Yoh was not satisfied. The poor were too easy. Their coins filled her floor, but their strength could only take her so far. She wanted more. She wanted men with power, men with wealth, men whose fall would shake the town to its knees. Each week, she took a few more factory men into her red room, pounding their testicles into her mortar, seasoning her food with their pain. The spell grew stronger, her beauty sharper, her smile brighter. Soon, even chiefs and businessmen passing by stopped at her door. They laughed with the workers, eating from the same bowl, their pride swallowed with each spoonful. Madame Oyoh Yoh watched them closely. Her trap was ready. The first to fall was a trader, a man known for his cattle and gold. He stopped one evening out of curiosity, and one taste was enough to chain him. He returned the next day, and the day after that, leaving his wife crying at home. His sons begged him to return, but he ignored them. The buka fire burned in his eyes, and his pockets emptied into Madame Oyoh Yoh's hands. Soon, others followed. Chiefs, lorry owners, politicians passing through. The rich men of Afari, once proud and untouchable, now sat shoulder to shoulder with the factory workers, all chewing from the same cursed pot. Their laughter was the same, their hunger the same, their minds gone. The wives of these rich men began to panic. They could not fight her openly, for her food had captured the whole town. But they saw the pattern, and they remembered the whispers. Alake'S daughter had returned. The old story said she grew stronger with each sacrifice, and once she set her eyes on the powerful, she would not stop. Inside the red room, the pounding grew louder. Thump, thump, thump. Not just poor men anymore, but the mighty and the wealthy, their pride cut off, their manhood crushed into spice. Madame Oyoh Yoh laughed as she stirred, her pants soaking in the pot, her power spreading across Afari like fire. The town had become her banquet, and no one dared to speak her name aloud. The market of Afari was filled with sound, but not the sound of traders or children. It was the sound of weeping. Women sat on the dusty ground, holding babies, their wrappers loose, their hair undone. They shouted the names of their husband, who had not returned from the factory, who had not slept in their beds, who now spent every evening at the buka, where Madame Oyoh Yoh stirred her jollof. Our husbands eat her food and forget us, one woman cried. They no longer call our names. They no longer look at our children. Another lifted her hands to the sky. Let the elders hear us. Let them bring back our men. And so the crowd marched to the palace, their feet beating the earth like a drum of war. The elders of Afari sat on their stools in the meeting hall, their heads wrapped in cloth, gold bracelets shining on their wrists. They pretended to be shocked as the women poured out their complaints. Our men are vanishing into that red room, they shouted. We hear pounding at night, not of yam, but of flesh. The eldest elder raised his hand for silence, his voice soft like honey. My daughters, calm your hearts. We are your fathers. We will take care of it. Madam Oyoh Yoh is only a food seller, nothing more. Go home and sleep. The women looked at one another, fear burning in their eyes. Their cries had been heard, but their hearts told them no one would truly fight for them.